Welcome to Emotional Algebra. It's a podcast to help us all become better people through understanding the different variables that drive our behaviors. I'm your co-host, Andrew Tavani.
And I'm Dr. E. And I got to tell you, Andrew, you know, every time I come out of that, I usually kind of am chuckling a little because I love that opening so much. And you see me on camera, usually doing some type of dance to it or something like that. So
it is a very body moving, inspiring type of music and graphics. Whoever put that together, I don't know if you did it. Did you make that, Dr. E?
Well, I did the audio. I found the audio for it, but I designed it with somebody on, here's an ad, Fiverr. So yeah, I found somebody on that platform who put it together for me, and with all the ideas I sent them. So it was
great.
Fun to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it came out amazing. I feel like it really sets the tone for what we discuss here every week when we do this. And the music is great too. And I know you have a musical background. So no doubt that a lot of thought went into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, yep. I know that just for our viewers, you found out something on one of our other calls that I went to Berkeley in the 80s, and my roommate was John Popper from Blues Traveler. So my brush with fame.
That's right.
So if any of you don't know Blues Traveler, go ahead and take a listen on YouTube or whatever platform you choose. Spotify. I'm throwing out a bunch of spots today.
Yeah, all sorts of plugs going on here. But yeah, Blues Traveler, Blues Traveler, a band I love. I have loved them for decades at this point, and so it's really cool that you had the experience of playing music with him. You know, which is what you did.
Yeah. I miss playing music like I used to, but it wasn't in the cards for me to be the career musician. So I accepted that fate after I went to Berkeley. It was a lot of competition there, and Branford Marsalis entered there just after I was there. So he obviously has done amazing things with his music too. So just cool life experiences. And again, it just goes back to the things that I teach about. I really want people to see the wisdom in just engaging in life, give it your best, and just live in those moments. And in that, you know, again, that's just one of many different experiences that I've had in life that I'm really thankful for.
Absolutely. And I can tell too that it influences you, even though you're not doing music on a full-time basis. Like there you go. There's a really cool little piece of music that introduces this show every week to people. So it's great to see that. Last episode, Dr. E, we covered a lot about social media. We talked about your trip to Japan, and we talked about sort of Instagram culture and how that manifests itself in Japan, which is a very different culture from the US, but how it also manifests itself here, and sometimes in similar ways as well.
Right. You know, I talked a little bit about that bleed over from American culture, but you know, in full disclosure, I haven't done enough research or been in Japanese culture to really make an absolute true or judgment of that. And I always want to be transparent about those things. I thought about the episode afterwards. You know, I'd read about the culture. My daughter had educated me about the culture, and I felt like at some level I might have made a leap. However, the degree to which we see so many people, not just in Japan, but also around the world with their Instagram clips, and the degree we kind of talked about that me versus we concept, I think is important. The other thing I wanted to also say is I want to be careful as a host not to sound like, you know, as a psychologist, I'm doing everything right and I've got this great attitude and all these things. Even when I was in Japan and my daughter kept lecturing my wife and I about the cultural issues and the expected behaviors, there were definitely times when I gauged my own reaction and response because that's not the way I was used to. And I had that response, and I would definitely look around and see people are still human. And I think I commented on it last time too. While I also wanted to be above board too and say, yes, I have my internal responses. I even probably had my external reactions to things. And I think in that, the more honest that, like I said, we all are with ourselves in moments, and the more honest that we can see our real, feel, and ideal selves, and really understanding what leads to our emotional algebra, I think that's the key. And the point I wanted to address with Instagram is we talked a lot about arrogance and that concept of narcissism. And I think the issues that go into those equations are those deeper emotions that we're all trying to hide in our own insecurities and inadequacies. And we want to moderate those. Basically, if we look at the equation, we have to do something to cancel out those insecurities. So we think if we use arrogance and we use even defiance of other people's feedback toward us, or the negative comments we get, and we develop more and more of that, the more negatives we have, the more we have to try to cover that up with those false positives. And that's what my concern is for so many in this culture, because our walls are getting so thick. And as our walls get thick, we lose more touch with ourselves. We become more separate from our real and our ideal selves, which to me leads to more issues down the line. So in that, I think we look beyond just the trip to Japan and what I saw with this kind of spreading Instagram culture and our discussion on the great article that you found. But I really look at our overall psychological welfare that's being driven by this, click culture. And again, even there, when people say, oh, I don't do it for the clicks, I do it for artistic reasons, I do it because I like to take photos, it's still for the clicks. And again, that's where we just want to be honest, because that's where we feel like we get the validation, and I think that's important to really just, again, be honest with ourselves so that we make sure we don't get fooled, not only by ourselves, but the people around us.
Yes, and I think you're doing that right now, as a matter of fact. But that's one of the themes I feel like of this show. You seem to always be talking about being observant about your own behaviors and your own actions, in how that works out to it into your emotional algebra and in the way you interact with others. And on social media, on Instagram or whatever, you are interacting with others in a way. It's a different way, but it is an interaction. And right. It also, I feel like, taps into some negative aspects very naturally, right? Maybe that's, I don't know what it is, how social media was designed, how these algorithms choose what it shows various people and so forth. But
well, yeah. I think we have to look at the positive and negative aspects of everything. Anything used to excess, or anything used to manipulate, anything used to undermine, to me, becomes a more unproductive aspect of what has been a great tool to connect people around the world. I mean, I've done educational workshops online in India, 2 of them. I was, asked to do 2 of those through India. And part of that came through some of the connections I made through social media. So in my trips to Haiti, to Jordan, the work I've done, around the country, social media has been a great bridge. And I've met some really amazing people through that too. And I did a online presentation with a group of Harvard alumni. And from that was introduced to another Harvard alum, who was the first blind graduate of the Harvard Business School, just a really neat guy. So there's so many positives that I don't just want this to sound only negative, and because I'm not trying to turn it in that. It's balance, and it's understanding our own motivations that really lead to that. And one thing that's an extension of this is, and we're going to do a whole episode on this maybe next time or in the future, but about personal branding. And I think too often we don't really think about what our brand is when we're doing these things. And not only what is our brand today, but what do we want our brand to be throughout time. And again, this is something we'll probably get into the next episode more, but I want to introduce the idea that it's something that's crafted over time. It's something that's curated, and you want it to stand the test of time. And I've been glad to have people around me to help me make sure that I've kind of kept that brand online and hope that people also see that too, that consistency throughout the work that I do, whether it's here on an emotional algebra or in the work I did on TV or the work I've done in Haiti, Jordan, you know, those different places.
Right. And I would say that's probably not something that's especially easy, especially for younger people, I would imagine too. You seem to have been very thoughtful about it. And you've appeared on many TV shows and whatnot, or news shows and so forth. But like you said, it feels like it all had a sort of a purpose in mind, a larger purpose, a long-term purpose.
Yeah. And, you know, and it was always important for me to not worry about rising above the fray. And I think that's where we're at again with the Instagram thing. We want to get clicks, we want to get likes, we want to build a brand, we want to get endorsements and sponsors and all those things so that we can make a living doing this. And there's a lot of people you find who just get burned out and or do have some of those psychological issues as a result of their efforts to try to capture those moments. And, you know, shooting stars can burn out pretty quickly sometimes.
You know, obviously we're talking a lot about the negatives of social media, but there are positives. We've acknowledged that as well. And this is one that I thought was rather positive. I saw this clip, Bill Walton, the NBA legend, Hall of Fame basketball player. I knew him more as a broadcaster, which I think a lot of people, you know, my age and younger will know him more as a broadcaster than a player. But he died in late May. And so people were posting on social media. He spoke a lot publicly, so people were posting various clips of his. And I watched his clip, and my first thought was Dr. E. He's saying thematically, I think a lot of the things that you say, and he was actually repeating some ideas that were introduced by his coach at UCLA, John Wooden, who is also a basketball legend in his own right as a coaching legend. So, you know, I sent it to you, and you actually recognized some similar things to some of the things you've discussed. I think number one being he talks, you know, he doesn't actually say it, but I think is alluding to an equity-based, you know, model of things, which is one of the things you talk closely about. But we can take a look at it. We can play a few. The clips itself is a little over 2.5 minutes. We can look at it and discuss. But I think there's some interesting things in here. I think you might think as well too, right? All right, let's
roll.
Let's roll it.
And then Coach Wooden, he lived by his 2 sets of threes, and he implored us to give it a try. And those 2 sets of threes: don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses. That covers a lot of ground. And then Coach Wooden had a billion maxims and mantras that he would throw out at just the appropriate time. His use of the English language, unparalleled. That was his true love. And so he would say things to us like, be quick, but don't hurry, whatever the heck that means. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Happiness begins when selfishness ends. Never mistake activity for achievement. The worst things you could do for the ones you love are the things they could and should do for themselves. Stubbornness we deprecate, firmness we condone. The former is my neighbor's trait, the latter is my own. When everybody thinks alike.
Can you pause it there, Andrew?
Yes.
So I think right there, that one comment, what I like about what Wooden did is he had, again, all these quick phrases that stick with you. Obviously, they made a huge impact on Bill, you know, and he held them with him, and they're just real quick sound bites almost. The idea that he even is in kind of implying about stubbornness and firmness is our idea of our ideal and real. So he again said, well, my neighbor's stubborn, I'm firm. And in that, it's again, how do we want to view ourselves, and how did he want to you know, view himself? Even Coach like Wooden, it's all in the interpretation, it's all in the perception. And often we want to put our side on the positive side of those perceptions and interpretations, because we want to remember, we want to try to feel as good and or look as good and or strong and or right as possible in these hierarchical models so we can win. And winning isn't everything. And so let's go back to that and keep rolling.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one quick thing too. The other, talk about a soundbite. failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that really speaks to what you're doing here. Emotional algebra is like this sort of preparation for how you interact with people. And if you fail to prepare, what's going to happen in those relationships? I just thought that was one of the other things that struck me about this video. But let's go back to it here.
Absolutely.
It's okay to disagree, just don't be disagreeable.
That's good for our country today.
On the day I graduated from UCLA, June 1974, 45 and a half years ago, to Bill Walton. It's the things you learn after you know it all that count. John Wooden. That still sits on my desk. But his fallback go-to mantra was always the same. He would look at us with a straight face, and he would say, he was a very serious guy, and took his job with great duty, solemnity, respect. He would look at us and he would say, remember guys, basketball is just like life. It's not a game of size and strength, it's a game of skill, timing, and position. It's not how big you are, it's how big you play. It's not how high you jump, it's where you are and when you jump. And so while Coach Wooden is racing through all these positive aspects of our personal foundation, I'm scratching my head. That's why I'm bald today, because I just can never stop scratching my head. And I would just look at him and I'd say, Coach, you cannot possibly believe these things that you're saying, particularly when you tell us that basketball is not a game of size and strength. Come on. Kareem has all the records, Shaq has all the money, and Wilt has 20,000 girlfriends. So you tell me it's not a game of size and strength? And he'd look at me and say, Walton, you're the slowest learner I've ever had. Don't you realize it's not about stuff? It's not about material accumulation. It's about training the mind to become the champion in everything that you do. But that requires you to play on the teeter-totter of life. Leadership and risk and fearlessness, ego, humility, and making that decision and the choice that I am going to make the sacrifice for the greater goals of the team.
And go ahead and great clip, because in the end, he's really clearly, I think what he's also addressed is his own growth through time, that here he was able to capitalize off of this great coach who really grew and learned over time from an age of hierarchy and wanting power over in how much money, how many girlfriends you have, how many records you have, to then the long run of really seeing that's not it. What's it is really, is he even was talking about really personal integrity. So there's 3 words that I often try to teach people. I may have mentioned before, but truth, honor, and integrity. Those are the things I want people to learn to live their lives by. And what I love is, again, how so many people don't see, because they're not in the locker rooms, that sports are a lot more than sports. Sports are often a metaphor for life in the way we approach, but it's the ability of the coach to use what he's teaching to really bring those messages home. It's the same thing I do in my office when I play chess, checkers, Chinese checkers, Jenga, darts. We go out and throw the football, kick the soccer ball. All these things, I'm incorporating life lessons into that, because I think it's often through these situations that we can really learn about our own approaches to life and learn the value of equity over hierarchy. Even if somebody's playing golf for themselves, there's still that equity-based, to me, approach we can take in the mind that not every shot is going to be a great shot. And yeah, we're going to have those shots that we miss here and there's. How do we find our way back again? How do we find the understanding of the emotions, the beliefs, the attitudes that help us to find those successful shots, and also that can keep us stuck in those shots that don't go so well, whether it's a golf shot, a shot in basketball, or even the shots we take in life. So all these situations, what I really want people to see is use life as a way to learn from every situation. This is school. Again, this is emotion school. This is situation and scenario school, to play things out and see what works. Be willing to learn from others, be willing to learn from yourself, and be willing to share what you've learned with others, not in a way that's preachy. And I think that's where one of his quotes also, about being not disagreeable, but it's okay to disagree. I think, again, that's another issue we have to look in our culture right now, is how if we disagree, we feel like we can't come together. And that's just not the case. When everybody thinks alike, as he said too, then nobody's thinking. So great quotes in here, great, again, equity-based concepts that we're talking about. And it's been there. All the seeds are there. It's if we choose to plant them in our life that's most important.
And what did you think about Walton's sort of lifelong embrace of some of those ideas? He says in the speech that he, questioned Wooden on, do you really believe this stuff that you're telling us? And but later in life, there he is, maybe 40 years later, he's actually recounting that in a speech in front of people. So clearly he, at some point, arrived at some agreement with what Wooden was trying to pass on to this younger generation.
And even as a coach, no coach, I actually minored in sports psychology in grad school because I love sports. But, even a good coach does not coach all his players the same way. Sometimes you want to get the player started by maybe promoting some of those more hierarchical views while you start to weave in and plant those equity-based views. You got to grow the team while sometimes you recruit the star. They can't always be the star. And if you're, if for people have watched the Olympics and they're watching the basketball team, you have all these amazing stars and that all have to be willing to play a role. Some people are born leaders. Some people are those point people that are just skilled at bringing the best out of people. And sometimes people are the clutch players. Sometimes they're the role players. Sometimes they're the defenders. And if we can be comfortable and find our comfort in that and realize we don't have to be the best at anything, let alone everything. It's about being our best. That's what we want to look at. We'll constantly look at growing rather than feel like we need everybody else's validation or have the records or the girlfriends or the cash or all those things like that. Those can be, the secondary gains to me. The primary gain is that we really look inside. And I think that's in the long run why Wooden had so many championships. He was a great recruiter. I mean, even Mike Krzyzewski had some great life lessons that he wove into what he did and how he became a coach. So to me, great coaches are great coaches about life, not just the sport or the skill.
Right. Life coaches. Now, what do you think about how this sort of relates back to social media? This is a very positive clip. I think this is an example of a positive we found on social media. And I think when we were looking at that, it had, millions of views, or a couple, maybe 1.4 million, or
right.
It clearly reached a lot of people and resonated with people. However, I think it's sort of different from the model we were discussing at the top of this show when we were talking about people posting things just solely for likes or solely for validation somehow. This was posted by an account called retirementunity.com. I don't even know what that is, but it seemed like it was the purpose of it was more to spread sort of the ideas in here rather than looking for some validation. And obviously validation came with that because it did resonate.
Well, and who's their customer? You have Retirement Unity. Are you looking to capture a base that's more in your 40s and up or so versus your youth?
And then Coach Wooden, he lived.
There's that joke that says, youth is wasted on the young, and I think in that we're disregarding the opportunities to grow and learn. We're all going to make mistakes. And I have to remind myself of that with my daughter, that she's going to grow through things. She's going to make mistakes. I just don't want to see her go through the pains that I see in so many other pains that so many others are going through. If they be able just to recognize some of these deeper issues, but often we don't learn unless we do. So it's how we do and how the follow-up. The issue that I continue to have with social media is the rewards that we get through social media are often the surfacey things. They're not the meaningful things. And then when we feel like people are getting slammed on or, demeaned or humiliated, yeah, we look at those things as these horrific events. And then what do we do with it? Do we blame everybody else? Do we take some ownership and learn for it? Do we change our course? Do we continue to plow through? Again, those are all things that we can learn from in each of our individual journey. But I think the biggest thing that we want is, how are we following up on those life lessons? I think I've talked about the definition of wisdom being the application of knowledge gained through qualitative interpretations of experience over time. The key word to that is qualitative, because we can think we have wisdom by going through the same thing over and over, or having a bunch of people tell us all right, or having people tell us we're so great and we're so smart. Where has been our qualitative interpretation to really see, how did I feel in that? Did that feel like that came from a place of integrity? Is that really I want my life to go? Do I want to have more money in the bank, or do I want to have more friends in my heart? And those are the things that we also want to look at. And what is the qualitative aspect of those friendships, of those relationships? Because again, I believe in gaining wealth and earning wealth. And it's wealth that I want to feel good about inside and out, and in all the things around me. And that's where I think we're a bit lost in this me culture versus the we culture. Not that it's good or bad or right or wrong or strong or weak. It just is.
Thinking about sort of the emotional algebra surrounding social media, a word I have heard you say a number of times during this episode is integrity. Would you say that might be maybe the most important aspect of how, the calculations that are made when using social media, no matter what your age is?
Yeah, I think really, how are we learning integrity? I look, and again, look at our political systems. Look at what people feel and see in the media. Look at what people see and feel on what we say and then what we do. I think integrity is huge in that. They say integrity is what you do when nobody's looking. They say that about honoring things. But I have a whole talk that I do on integrity in my office, where I have these Jenga blocks that I stack up on top of each other. And in that, and stacking those blocks up, one side, one line, they're all stacked in alignment. And I talk about building integrity, construction integrity, or structural integrity, which is basically, can a building stand up under the tests of time, whether it be earthquakes or hurricanes or different storms, different life events? Is it built on a strong foundation? And a lot of times I'll talk about what happened in the Haitian earthquakes, why all the buildings fell, because they didn't have all the structural integrity they needed. Well, people are the same way. So I have the one that's all the blocks are stacked up all in line and all one on top of the other. And I have the other one where the Jenga blocks are turned and twisted, and they're off center. And in that, what I help people to see is, when all the blocks are in line, first you have a center of gravity. And a center of gravity and integrity is really important. In other words, that kind of goes to your personal brand. In the other box, you don't have necessary center of gravity. You might have blocks twisted and turned, and you can have a center of gravity, but then those blocks tend to lean one way or another because they're still out of balance. So there's a lot of features to look at with integrity here. And when I talk about integrity, it comes from our family life, our spiritual life, our education, our vocation, our friendships, all our financial endeavors and intentions, all these things. To me, we want to make sure that they're all in alignment. And that's really important when it comes to integrity, because I think, again, why we want to look at that is, where is our culture? Where do cultures fall? A long time ago, I said the downfall of every empire is arrogance. And I feel our culture is falling now. And, I think we have to look at, why is it falling? Because again, it's becoming about a we thing. It's becoming about the individual, and everybody's standing in all these different ways. So not only are we missing out on personal integrity, I think we're missing out on integrity in our communities, integrity in our cultures, integrity in our political system. And we have to catch this now, because it's becoming late in the game to really see these patterns. And, you brought up who's watching these clips. Well, often the people who need to watch the things that they can really learn from, it doesn't resonate well because of what they feel when they watch the clips that are the really strong advice, that are helping people to really look inside and evaluate their real identity, and really look at their own emotional algebra.
I want to go back to something you said about our culture and how it sounds like you're saying it could be dire for our culture. I feel like a lot of people out there listening to this or watching this may agree with that. How long do you think this has been going on for? And sort of how you said it's late stage. How late are we here?
You know, those are great questions, and they're challenging questions. You know, I think, again, if we look throughout the history of man has been one who our goal became to survive. And we learned hierarchically to survive by having power over people, not power with people. And we also have some great cultures that learn to have power with each other and with people. So in that, we have to look at how have we enculturated this idea of power over and this we concept that has been there really for decades, you know. And I think when we look at what brought us together was that great melting pot of realizing everybody who came from different countries, different areas, different skill sets really pulled together to make the country what it is. And it wasn't about everybody being great. It was the idea that collectively there were so many things we did together collectively as a world during, you know, when we had world wars and things, we pulled together. And you know, and unfortunately, it's often through those challenges of wars that we feel we finally have to pull together. I'd love us to pull together because it's in our highest good. And where are we in the game? I'm really concerned about where we are in the game, because what's happening is I don't see kids in recent generations, and I'd even say in my generation, you're always going to have some too, but where they're not trying as hard. They're not feeling they have to work as hard and learn as much. They're not seeing the value in sweat equity and really seeing what they can do to make a difference in their life, to be the best they can be. Being the best you can be and being better than somebody else isn't the same thing at all, because I think we can use people as measuring sticks, but they don't have to become our yardstick. You know, so we can see what can be done while feeling we don't have to surpass them. They become a model, but then we can also take our own skill set and do what we can. So who's my demographic on this, and do I hope are listening? I hope everybody's listening, but who would I really love to reach are, again, our kids, teenagers, young adults, to really see that I've been where you are. I went through those times of great arrogance. I remember in college, I was irrepressible in my arrogance. And, you know, from when I went to being really skinny to then getting into weightlifting, and to even when I, you know, played my sax and got my scholarship, it was always, look at how great I am. And I've learned over time, but I hope that there are a number of people out there who can learn from others so that they don't have to take their lumps. If they do, though, I hope that you're willing to learn from those mistakes. And remember, failure tells us when it's time to learn. Stupid lets us know when we felt multiple failures. Therefore, there's multiple things to learn from.
Wise words, Dr. E. And I'm really looking forward to exploring personal branding, which I feel like goes hand in hand with a lot of the things you're just saying right there. And so that'll be in the next episode. So I'm excited to delve into that. Any other thoughts you want to close with here?
No, it's always an enjoyable journey. Again, I hope people are finding the balance in what's being presented. I realize that there's oftentimes I do my Monday morning quarterbacking after these episodes, which is why we follow up next time. And I'm sure I'll find something that I could do better in this. In everything I do, people might say I'm overly critical. I just want to be analytical and make sure that I'm always evaluating myself to see how can I continue to improve? How can I be better? And I do that not just for myself, but also it's part of my truth, honor, and integrity. It's part of me being exemplary towards my daughter and towards other people that I work with. And you know, if all we ever do is hide behind our arrogance, our defiance, our you know, all those protective emotions, and our denial, which are, again, cognitive defenses and things, we're not going to see the truth of our circumstance, and we're not going to make the most out of the life that we've been blessed with.